Throughout this chapter, students will learn how to write and interpret numerical expressions, analyze patterns and relationships, and graph points on the coordinate plane to solve real-world and mathematical problems. In order to be successful with the concepts and skills taught in this chapter, students have learned some necessary prerequisite skills in prior lessons and grades. The first prerequisite skill is the order of operations as it pertains to multiplication and division, and addition and subtraction. They have learned that multiplication and division are to be completed simultaneously, left to right, before addition and subtraction are completed simultaneously, from left to right. For example, students will know in the expression 3 times 4 minus 2 plus 3, the 3 times 4 will be completed first. The expression will now read 12 minus 2 plus 3. The next step will be to take away 2 from 12 for a difference of 10. Now the expression reads 10 plus 3, which equals 13. The next prerequisite skill will be to have a basic understanding of operation terminology, as well as symbols. For example, sum means addition and can be shown with an addition sign. Difference means subtraction and is shown with a subtraction sign. Product means multiply and can be shown by placing a multiplication sign, and so on. Let's begin with the new skills taught in evaluating expressions and equations. Students in 5th grade will be formally introduced to the usage of parentheses, brackets, and braces as grouping symbols as it applies to the order of operations. These grouping symbols indicate that the operation within the symbols is to be completed before multiplying and/or dividing, and then adding and/or subtracting. There is no hierarchy among these symbols, although parentheses are the most commonly used. For example, the parentheses in the expression 4 times 3 plus 2 in parentheses minus 1 will be evaluated first. 3 plus 2 is 5. The expression now reads 4 times 5 minus 1. The next step will be to take 4 times 5, which is 20. Then 20 minus 1 is 19. In later grades, students will encounter situations in which parentheses, brackets, and braces are used in other mathematical contexts and in nesting situations. Students in 5th grade will not be nesting the symbols within each other. The next concepts that will be taught in this chapter are expressions and equations. In 5th grade, students will be introduced to the alternative ways of notating multiplication. The tables seen here are all different ways to note multiplication. Students will solidify their understanding of the difference between expressions and equations. An expression is a grouping of numbers, symbols, and/or operations that represents a value. An equation is a way of stating that two expressions or values are equal to each other. Equations have an equal sign, whereas expressions do not include an equal sign. Students will be asked to write expressions given in word form numerically and vice versa. For example, 30 divided by the product of 5 times 3. Numerically, it is represented like this. Students will also be asked to interpret expressions without evaluating or calculating them. This is because it encourages the students to focus on the numbers and operations in the expression rather than on the result. Students will use a variety of models, such as place value blocks and the box line dot method, to represent the expressions and equations. They will also use numerical representation. Let's try interpreting a set of equations. 16 divided by 4 multiplied by 2 and 16 divided by 4 multiplied by 6 will be our two expressions we will be comparing. Both equations have the same division operation of 16 divided by 4. This operation will be completed first in both expressions because they are in parentheses. Let's start by modeling the 16 divided by 4. Place 16 cubes and divide them into 4 groups. Each group contains 4 cubes. The first expression multiplies the 16 divided by 4 by 2. Place another row of 4 cubes above the first row. The second expression multiplies the 16 divided by 4 by 6. Place 5 more rows or groups of 4 above the first row for a total of 6 rows. Both expressions begin by dividing 16 by 4, and both expressions have at least one group of 2 rows of 4. The second expression has 3 times as many units as the first expression. This is because when a quantity is multiplied by 6, it is 3 times as many as that same quantity multiplied by 2. The next concept taught is patterns. Students will extend their knowledge of generating patterns from a given rule to exploring the relationship between the 2 patterns and their resulting graph on a coordinate plane. This standard prepares students for functions in 8th grade. The focus of this exploration is not about naming the pattern rules, but rather discussing relationships between corresponding terms of the patterns and general trends. For example, looking at this pattern, some observations that might be made are all of the numbers are even except term 1. The pattern grows very quickly from term to term. The value of a term in pattern B is twice the value of the corresponding term in pattern A. The final concept students will be taught is the graphing of points on the coordinate plane. For example, plot the ordered pair 7, 4 in parentheses. The first coordinate, 7, is the x-coordinate and runs along the x-axis. The x-axis is the horizontal measurement. It is important to count the lines along the axis. The next coordinate, 4, is the y-coordinate and runs along the y-axis. The y-axis is the vertical measurement. To plot the point, start at the origin, which is the point 0, 0, and move out along the x-axis 7 lines, and from there move up along the y-axis 4 lines. Where these 2 lines intersect represents the point 7, 4. Students will then use their knowledge of patterns and graphing coordinates to solve real-world problems where they look for patterns and trends on a coordinate plane, like the example here. The pattern was given and the students looked for a relationship between the 2 patterns in the x and y coordinates. This particular graph had a constant increase, meaning that the x and y values increased by the same amount each term. It was also found that the x value, pattern A, increases more slowly than the y value, pattern B. Throughout this chapter, students learned how to write and interpret numerical expressions, analyze patterns and relationships, and graph points on the coordinate plane to solve real-world and mathematical problems. The ability to recognize and analyze patterns is essential in mathematics, and the ability to communicate the patterns through numerical expression allows students to prove their thinking.